The universe, as it turns out, has a sense of humor drier than a martini on Mercury. Not that the Galactic Confederation understood humor. Most species evolved without it, finding the concept of deliberately creating cognitive dissonance for pleasure to be as bizarre as voluntarily submerging oneself in acid. But then again, most species didn't evolve on what the Confederation classified as death worlds, those hellish planetary spheres where gravity crushed, atmospheres poisoned, temperatures swung between extremes, and the local fauna considered everything, including each other, as either mate, meal, or menace. Earth, of course, was classified as a Class 12 death world. The Confederation had a neat little scale from 1 to 12, with most civilized species originating from the comfortable 3-5 range. The humans, those strange bipedal mammals with their alarmingly robust cardiovascular systems and disturbing tendency to heal from almost anything, sat right at the top of the scale, which brings us to the incident at Outpost Zeta 9, a story that diplomatic officials from 17 species have attempted to classify as exaggerated, apocryphal, or most desperately, physically impossible. Alas for interstellar relations, the station's security feeds captured every glorious second. The Confederation military had established Zeta 9 as a forward operating base near the contested Orion Spur, that troublesome spiral arm where humans had been spreading with alarming speed. The outpost functioned primarily as an intelligence-gathering hub, with Commander Vrextuel of the Herex Dominion overseeing operations with his characteristic blend of paranoia and ambition. The Deathworlder delegation arrives in 3 cycles, Vrextuel announced to his senior staff, his cranial membrane fluctuating with a violet hue that indicated extreme agitation. We will use this opportunity to assess their vulnerabilities. First Officer Kulrath, whose species evolved as filter feeders on a gentle aquatic world, quivered slightly. Commander, might I suggest caution? The diplomatic protocols specifically... The protocols, Vrextuel interrupted, were designed by weak-spined bureaucrats who have never faced these creatures in combat. I've fought in the Proxima incident. I've seen what they can do. What Vrextuel neglected to mention was that his fighting in the Proxima incident consisted primarily of coordinating retreat operations from a command vessel safely positioned 2 star systems away. Meanwhile, aboard the approaching human vessel, _tenacious diplomacy _humans did love their ironic ship names, Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Reeves reviewed her mission parameters with the kind of resigned frustration unique to those who repeatedly bang their heads against bureaucratic walls. So, let me get this straight, she said, scrolling through her tablet while her tactical officer, Jason Chen, performed equipment checks. We're supposed to negotiate expanded mining rights in the Tau Ceti system, but we can't mention the fact that we know they've already been conducting illegal surveys there, and we have to pretend we don't know about their weapons cache on Outpost Zeta 9, which technically violates at least 3 different treaties. That's about sums it up, Chen replied, not looking up from the kinetic barrier generator he was calibrating. Oh, and Ambassador Michael says to remind you that this is a diplomatic mission. So your sidearm stays on the ship, Reeves snorted. Of course it does, because nothing says trust and friendship like meeting with an outpost full of armed Harex while we're wearing our formal best and carrying nothing more dangerous than a stylus. The truth was, Reeves didn't particularly need a weapon. Standing at 5'11" with the dense musculature that came from growing up in Earth's 1G environment, she was already considered a walking weapon by Confederation standards. Add to that her specialized combat training and the subdermal impact armor, a relatively new technology that hardened upon sudden force, and she was reasonably well protected even without obvious weaponry. Not that Ambassador Michaels knew about the impact armor. The diplomatic corps operated on a what they don't know won't hurt interdimensional relations policy when it came to security precautions. At least the food should be decent, Chan offered with forced optimism. Intelligence says the station chef is Morillian, and they understand protein-based diets. Fantastic. I'll try not to get assassinated before dessert. As the _tenacious diplomacy docked with Outpost Zeta 9, Commander Vrextuel was finalizing his own preparations. His personal guard, 8 Herex soldiers with chitinous exoskeletons and pulse rifles, stood at attention while he briefed them. The humans will attempt to manipulate the negotiations through their Deathworlder intimidation tactics, he explained, his voice resonator vibrating with authority. They may make sudden movements, display their teeth in their so-called smile gesture, or attempt to establish dominance through direct eye contact. You will maintain discipline at all times. Guard Captain Zexvril clicked his mandibles in acknowledgement. And if they become aggressive, Commander, Vrextul's cranial membrane flushed a deep crimson. Then you will demonstrate why the Herex Dominion has ruled this sector for 10,000 cycles. The docking procedure completed with the usual hissing of pressure equalization and the clunk of magnetic seals. Ambassador Michaels led the human delegation of 6 onto the station, with Reeves and Chen positioned just behind him. Standard diplomatic formation, advisors and technical experts at the rear, security, though officially listed as attachés, flanking the principal. Commander Vrextul, Ambassador Michaels said, performing the Confederation's standard greeting gesture, right appendage pressed flat against the thorax. On behalf of the United Earth Government, we appreciate your hospitality. Vrextul performed a cursory approximation of the same gesture. Ambassador, we have prepared accommodations suitable for your physiological requirements. Reeves maintained her professional demeanor, but inwardly rolled her eyes at the barely disguised contempt in the commander's tone. Standard operating procedure when dealing with the Herex, they considered themselves the pinnacle of evolution and viewed other species, particularly primitive Deathworlders, with thinly veiled disgust. The delegation was escorted to a conference chamber that had clearly been modified for human comfort. The temperature adjusted to a tolerable 22 DEC rather than the scorching 35 DEC the Herex preferred, and chairs that could actually support human anatomy rather than the perches most Confederation species used. That's when Reeves noticed something off about the room's configuration. The ventilation systems had been modified, with new fixtures that didn't match the station's standard architecture. Her enhanced ocular implants, another detail omitted from her official diplomatic credentials, detected microscopic nozzles embedded in the decorative wall panels. Ambassador, she said quietly, I recommend we request a different venue for the negotiations, perhaps somewhere more traditional. Ambassador Michaels gave her a look that clearly communicated not now, before turning back to Commander Vrextul with a diplomatic smile. Commander, before we begin, might I trouble you for a tour of your impressive facility? I've heard your new quantum communication array is state-of-the-art. It was a standard diplomatic maneuver. Flattery, combined with a request that would give them more information about the station's layout. Vrextul's membrane flickered with what might have been annoyance, but he inclined his head in agreement. Of course, Ambassador, though I must insist that your security personnel remain here. Certain areas of the station contained sensitive equipment, and there it was. The first direct power play. Reeves maintained her neutral expression, even as Ambassador Michaels hesitated. Protocol dictated that diplomatic protection should remain with the principal at all times, but refusing could be interpreted as an insult. Before Michaels could respond, Reeves stepped forward. Commander, perhaps a compromise? I would be happy to remain here while Officer Chen accompanies the ambassador. I'm actually quite interested in learning more about your environmental control systems. They're remarkably efficient. The statement was carefully calibrated, offering a concession while simultaneously letting Vrextul know that she had noticed the room modifications. The commander's compound eyes fixed on her, and for a moment his mandibles clicked rapidly, a Herex indication of surprise. Very well, he said eventually. Guard Captain Zexwell will remain to answer any questions you might have about our environmental systems. As the delegation filed out, leaving Reeves alone with Zexville and 2 other guards, she maintained her pleasant expression while mentally calculating odds and angles. The guards positioned themselves strategically, one by the door, one near what appeared to be an emergency containment panel, and Zexville himself directly across from her. So, Reeves said cheerfully, about those environmental controls. The supplementary ventilation system seems quite sophisticated. Newly installed? Zexvel's posture stiffened. Your observational capabilities are impressive for a mammal. Oh, you know us Deathworlders, she replied with a casual wave. Always looking for threats. Evolutionary habit, I suppose. The guard captain's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Indeed. Your species' paranoia is well documented. Reeves leaned forward slightly, noting how the guards' appendages tightened on their weapons in response. It's not paranoia if there are actually people out to get you, Captain. For instance, I can't help but notice those modified panels contain delivery systems for what I assume is some kind of gas. Probably something tailored to human physiology. Respiratory paralytic, perhaps. The temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees as Zexvril's compound eyes fixed on her. You are very direct for a diplomat. Technical attaché, actually. And yes, we humans tend to be direct. Another evolutionary adaptation from living on a planet where hesitation often meant being eaten by something with more teeth. The standoff lasted for approximately 12 seconds, an eternity in tactical situations. Then Zexvil made a gesture that Reeves recognized as the Harex equivalent of a shrug. The systems are merely precautionary. Your species is classified as potentially volatile. Funny, we say the same about you. Reeves smiled, displaying her teeth in what she knew would register to the Harex as a threat display. Though we typically use words like duplicitous and historically untrustworthy, rather than volatile. That was when the emergency communication panel on the wall chimed. Zexvil moved to answer it, maintaining eye contact with Reeves as he did so. The transmission was in standard Harex military code, but Reeves' neural implant translated enough to understand the gist. Commander Vextool ordering immediate action. Everything happened very quickly after that. Zexvril issued a command in rapid-fire Harex. The guard by the door raised his pulse rifle. Reeves was already moving, her Deathworlder reflexes approximately 1.8 times faster than the average Harex, allowing her to dive behind the conference table as the first shot sizzled through the air where she had been standing. Well, this negotiation has taken an unfortunate turn, she muttered to herself, calculating angles of fire while the subdermal armor beneath her diplomatic uniform activated, spreading a lattice of protective nanofibers throughout her epidermis. The table provided momentary cover, but it wasn't designed to withstand weapons fire. A second pulse blast shattered the synthetic material, sending fragments flying. Reeves rolled to the side, coming up in a crouch as she assessed her options. 3 armed Harex, 1 exit. No obvious weapons at hand except for whatever she could improvise. The odds weren't great, but she'd faced worse during the Centauri conflict. Captain, she called out. Shooting a diplomatic envoy violates at least 7 different Confederation treaties. Are you sure you want to add that to your service record? You will not be shot if you surrender, Zexvil responded, his voice resonator producing the Harex version of smug confidence. Commander Vrextul merely wishes to ensure the safety of the station by securing potential threats. Translation, they were taking hostages to gain leverage. Classic Harex negotiating tactic, if you could call it that. And I'd like a beach vacation on Proxima B, but we can't always get what we want, Reeves replied, ducking as another pulse blast carved a smoking groove in the wall behind her. She needed to move. The Harex had the advantage in terms of firepower, but their exoskeletons made them less agile in close quarters. If she could get within striking distance of one of them, the natural human advantage in terms of speed and adaptability might give her an edge. Reeves grabbed a fragment of the shattered table, a jagged piece about the size of her forearm, and hurled it at the lighting fixtures overhead. The improvised projectile connected with satisfying accuracy, plunging the room into emergency lighting conditions, which just happened to operate on a spectrum less optimal for Harex compound eyes. Using the momentary disorientation, she sprinted toward the nearest guard, closing the distance before he could adjust his aim. The Harex were stronger than humans in terms of raw power, but their movements were predictable. Evolutionary adaptations for combat on their high-gravity homeworld favored strength over speed. Reeves ducked under the guard's pulse rifle, driving her shoulder into his thoracic plate. Not to overpower him, which would be futile, but to disrupt his balance. The guard staggered backward, chitinous legs scrambling for purchase. She followed through with a precise strike to the neural cluster beneath his mandibles, one of the few vulnerable points in Harex physiology. The guard collapsed, but Reeves had no time to celebrate the small victory. Zexvril fired, and this time his aim was true. The pulse blast caught her square in the chest, the concentrated energy burning through her diplomatic uniform and impacting the subdermal armor beneath. The protective nanofibers absorbed much of the energy, but enough got through to send her flying backward, crashing into the wall with bone-jarring force. For a moment, everything went fuzzy, her vision blurring as pain receptors throughout her body screamed in unified protest. The subdermal armor had prevented the pulse blast from vaporizing a hole through her torso, but the impact trauma alone was significant. Medical nanites in her bloodstream, standard issue for high-risk diplomatic missions, though again not mentioned in her official file, kicked into emergency response mode, flooding her system with pain suppressants and coagulants. Through the haze, she heard Zexvrel approach, his chitinous legs clicking against the station flooring. "Impressive resilience," he commented, standing over her prone form. "Most species would be dead from a direct thoracic hit," Reeve coughed, tasting the metallic tang of blood. "Sorry to disappoint. Commander Vrextool will be interested in studying your physiological responses. Deathworlder research subjects are rare, so that was the game. Not just hostages, but test subjects." The Harex Dominion had been pushing the boundaries of bioweapon research for decades, always looking for an edge against rival powers. A living Deathworlder specimen would be valuable. Zexvril turned to the remaining guard. "Secure the human and prepare for transport to Medical Bay 3. Commander Vrextool wants her alive for questioning." That was their mistake. They assumed she was incapacitated. A reasonable assumption for any non-Deathworlder species. The pulse blast would have killed most outright, and even a Morlorian rock dweller would have been unconscious. But humans didn't evolve on Earth by being easy to kill. As the guard approached, Reeves remained motionless, controlling her breathing to appear more severely injured than she was. The medical nanites were working overtime, stabilizing her condition and repairing the worst of the damage. 23 seconds since the blast. Not enough time for full recovery, but enough to be dangerous. The guard bent down, reaching for her arms to restrain them. With explosive speed that surprised even Zexvril, Reeves surged upward, driving the heel of her palm into the underside of the guard's mandible with enough force to crack the exoskeleton. The guard reeled backward, and Reeves was on her feet, ignoring the screaming protest from her injured torso. Zexvril raised his pulse rifle, but Reeves was already inside his firing arc. She struck with precision rather than power, targeting the neural clusters and joint connections, the Harex equivalent of pressure points. The guard captain was skilled, parrying her first strike with his armored forearm, but he wasn't prepared for the human capacity for pain tolerance. Reeves took a glancing blow to her shoulder, the impact sending fresh waves of agony through her already traumatized body. But rather than retreat, she pushed forward, using the momentum to drive her elbow into Zexvril's breathing apparatus. Another vulnerability in Herrick's physiology. The guard captain staggered, mandibles flaring in distress as his respiratory system struggled to compensate. Reeves followed with a sweeping kick that connected with his rear leg joints, sending him crashing to the floor. Before he could recover, she had his own sidearm, a neural disruptor designed for close-quarter incapacitation, pressed against his cranial membrane. "Now," she said, breathing heavily as blood seeped through her ruined uniform, "let's discuss the revised terms of our diplomatic engagement." Zexvril's compound eyes fixed on her, his mandibles clicking in what might have been confusion or respect. "You should not be conscious, let alone combat-capable. Deathworlder, remember. Now, where would Commander Vrextool be taking the rest of my delegation?" The guard captain remained silent, and Reeves sighed dramatically. "Look, I'm having a really bad day. I've been shot, I'm missing out on that Morillian dessert I was promised, and now I have to extract information from someone who probably thinks stoic silence is heroic. Let me save us both some time." She adjusted her grip on the neural disruptor. "This is calibrated for Herrick's physiology, which means it disrupts the electrical signals in your neural network. Non-lethal, but extremely unpleasant. I'm guessing level 3 would be sufficient to make your cranial membrane feel like it's being slow cooked, but I'm willing to start at level 1 if you're feeling cooperative." It wasn't an idle threat, but it wasn't exactly standard diplomatic procedure either. Ambassador Michaels would have a fit if he knew she was threatening a Herrick's officer with his own weapon, but Ambassador Michaels was currently in custody, so his opinion carried less weight than usual. Zexvril's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Herrick's equivalent of nervous calculation. "The commander is taking them to secure holding on level 5. He intends to use them as leverage to extract technology concessions from your government. See, cooperation isn't so hard." Reeves adjusted the neural disruptor to level 1, just enough to cause unconsciousness without permanent damage, and applied it to Zexvril's neural cluster. The guard captain convulsed briefly before going limp, standing in a room with 3 unconscious Harex guards and a hole burned through her chest armor. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Reeves took stock of her situation. The medical nanites had stabilized her condition, but she was far from optimal fighting capacity. Her internal damage assessment indicated 2 cracked ribs, significant tissue trauma, and probably some internal bleeding. 23 seconds from near death to back in action, she muttered, retrieving Zex Vril's communication device and pulse rifle. Not my personal best, but respectable under the circumstances. The station layout was stored in her neural implant. Standard procedure for diplomatic security personnel. Level 5 would be 4 decks up, accessible via emergency stairwells or central lifts. The lifts would be monitored and probably locked down once the alarm was raised, which meant the stairwells were her best option. And me with only 2 functional lungs, she sighed, checking the charge on the pulse rifle before moving toward the exit. Typical Tuesday. The corridor outside was surprisingly empty. Most of the station personnel were likely unaware of Commander Vrextal's impromptu hostage situation. Reeves moved swiftly but cautiously, using the Harex communication device to monitor chatter. From what she could gather, Vrextal had isolated the human delegation in a secure holding area and was preparing to contact Earth authorities with his demands. She reached the emergency stairwell without incident, but her luck ran out on the 3rd level. 2 Harex security officers were descending, presumably responding to some alert from Zexvril. They spotted her immediately, mandibles flaring in alarm at the sight of a blood-stained human wielding a Harex weapon. "Gentlemen," Reeves said, managing a pained smile, "I seem to be lost. Could you direct me to the nearest coup d'etat?" The Harex responded by raising their weapons. Reeves fired first, the pulse rifle discharging with a high-pitched whine. The lead guard collapsed, his exoskeleton smoking where the blast connected. The second guard returned fire, forcing Reeves to duck behind the stairwell railing. "This is getting tedious," she muttered, calculating angles as pulse blasts sizzled overhead. Her injury was slowing her down. Normally, she'd have neutralized both guards within seconds. She waited for a pause in the firing pattern, then swung around the railing, pulse rifle braced against her shoulder. 2 quick shots, and the second guard joined his companion in unconsciousness. By the time she reached level 5, alarms were blaring throughout the station. Commander Vrextal was evidently aware that something had gone wrong with his plan. The secure holding area was at the end of a long corridor, guarded by 4 Harex soldiers with pulse rifles and what appeared to be shock batons. A frontal assault would be suicidal, even for a Deathworlder. Reeves needed a distraction. Accessing her neural implant, she interfaced with the station's environmental systems using credentials sliced from Zexvril's communication device. The Harex cybersecurity was impressive, but designed to repel external threats rather than authenticated internal users. With a few mental commands, she triggered emergency protocols in nearby sections, causing decompression warnings to sound and safety bulkheads to slam shut. The guards reacted predictably, 2 breaking off to investigate, while the remaining pair maintained their position with increased vigilance. 2 against 1 were better odds, but still not great in her condition. Reeves needed to even the playing field further. The ventilation system, the same one she had noticed earlier in the conference room, extended throughout this level. Using her implant's scanning function, she identified a maintenance access panel 20 meters back along the corridor. It was a tight fit for human anatomy, but that was a problem for future Alexandra to complain about. 5 minutes later, she was crawling through the station's ventilation system, following the blueprint in her neural display toward the holding area. The passage was claustrophobic and uncomfortably hot, designed for the Harex preference for high temperatures, but it got her past the guards and directly above the secure room where the human delegation was being held. Through a ventilation grate, she could see Ambassador Michaels and the others seated on the floor, with Commander Vrextal pacing before them, his cranial membrane fluctuating between crimson and purple. Extreme agitation in Harex emotional displays. "Your security officer's resistance is futile," he was saying, mandibles clicking emphatically. "This station has 43 combat-trained personnel. 1 injured human cannot prevail against such odds." Ambassador Michaels maintained his diplomatic composure, but Reeves could see the concern in his expression. "Commander, this course of action will have serious repercussions for Harex human relations. It's not too late to resolve this situation peacefully. Brextool made a sound that the translator rendered as derisive laughter. Peaceful resolution? Your species doesn't understand the concept. You evolved on a world of constant violence and competition. The only language you truly comprehend is force, says the guy who shot our security officer and took diplomats hostage, Chen muttered, earning himself a warning glare from the ambassador. From her position, Reeves could see that Vrextul was wearing a neural command circuit, a device that linked him directly to the station's security systems. That gave her an idea. Using her implant, she began a targeted electromagnetic pulse sequence, focusing on the specific frequency used by Herek's neural interfaces. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Vrextul staggered, his cranial membrane blanching to a sickly yellow as the neural circuit malfunctioned, feeding him conflicting data streams. The two guards in the room turned toward their commander in confusion, momentarily distracted from their prisoners. That was all the opening Reeves needed. She kicked out the ventilation grate and dropped into the room, pulse rifle already firing. The first guard went down before he could even register the new threat. The second managed to get off a wild shot that missed her by meters before a pulse blast to his neural cluster put him down. Commander Vrextul, still disoriented from the neural circuit malfunction, reached for his sidearm with uncoordinated movements. Revs crossed the distance between them in 3 rapid strides, knocking the weapon from his grasp with a precise strike. "Lieutenant Commander," Ambassador Michaels exclaimed, "your timing is impeccable, though your methods are somewhat unorthodox." "Sorry about the dramatic entrance, Ambassador," Reeves replied, keeping her pulse rifle trained on Vrextul. Conventional diplomacy seemed to be at an impasse. The Herek's commander had recovered enough to glare at her with his compound eyes. "Impossible. Zexville reported a direct thoracic hit. You should be dead or at minimum incapacitated." Reeves offered him a blood-stained smile. "Deathworlder, remember? We're notoriously hard to kill. Now we're going to discuss the terms of your surrender." Vrextul's mandibles clicked rapidly in what the translator identified as a threat display. "I will not surrender to a primitive species. The Herek's dominion has ruled this sector for 10,000 cycles." "Yes, I heard the speech earlier," Reeves interrupted. "Very impressive. But right now, you're going to order your personnel to stand down and restore communication with our vessel, or we're going to have a practical demonstration of Deathworlder combat techniques." The commander's cranial membrane pulsed with defiance. "You would not dare. Killing a Herek's military commander would be an act of war." "Who said anything about killing?" Reeves adjusted her grip on the pulse rifle. "I'm thinking more along the lines of a forced cranial molt. Painful and humiliating, but survivable. Your choice." For a tense moment, the room was silent, except for the blaring alarms. Then Vrextul's posture sagged in the Herek's gesture of capitulation. "Very well. I will order my personnel to stand down." "Excellent decision, Commander." Reeves maintained her aim as Vrextul activated his communication device and issued the surrender order. Once confirmed, she lowered the pulse rifle slightly. "Ambassador, I suggest we return to our vessel immediately. I doubt Confederation authorities will look favorably on the commander's unauthorized hostage operation, but I'd rather not be here for the bureaucratic fallout." Ambassador Michaels nodded, helping the other delegation members to their feet. "I concur, though I believe some documentation of this incident would be appropriate for the diplomatic record." "Already downloading the security feeds," Chen said, tapping at a terminal he had accessed during the confrontation. "Clear evidence of treaty violations, unprovoked aggression, and attempted detention of diplomatic personnel. The Confederation's Security Council will have a field day with this." Vrextul's compound eyes fixed on Reeves, his mandibles clicking softly. "You realize the Herek's Dominion will not simply accept this humiliation. There will be consequences." Reeves regarded him steadily. "There already are consequences, Commander. Your career, for instance, is effectively over. And when word gets out that a single injured human overcame your entire security force and left you pleading for mercy, I imagine the Dominion's reputation will suffer as well." With a fluid motion that belied her injuries, she stepped forward and grasped Vrextul by his cranial ridge, a deeply disrespectful gesture in Herek's culture. "Just so we're clear, the next time you or any Herek's forces fire on human diplomatic personnel, the response won't be nearly as restrained. We may be newcomers to galactic politics, but we've been practicing warfare for our entire evolutionary history. She released him with a slight shove. Ambassador, shall we? As the human delegation made their way back to their vessel, escorted by thoroughly subdued Harex guards, Reeves maintained her professional demeanor despite the pain radiating from her chest wound. The medical nanites had done their job keeping her functional, but she would need proper treatment once they were safely aboard the tenacious, diplomacy Lieutenant Commander, Ambassador Michaels said quietly as they approached the docking bay. I feel I should officially reprimand you for engaging in unauthorized combat operations during a diplomatic mission. Reeves nodded. Understood, sir. However, he continued with the ghost of a smile, as no official report has yet been filed, and considering the unique circumstances, perhaps we can characterize your actions as proactive security measures in response to clear and present danger to diplomatic personnel. That has a nice ring to it, sir. I thought so, though I would appreciate advance warning before any future proactive measures. No promises, Ambassador. Deathworlders are notoriously unpredictable. 3 days later, in the Confederation Security Council chambers on Nexus Station, representatives from 17 species listened in stunned silence to Ambassador Michaels' formal complaint against the Harex Dominion, complete with security footage showing Commander Vrextool's actions and Lieutenant Commander Reeves' subsequent response. The Harex representative, a senior diplomatic official named Vrexkor, attempted to dismiss the incident as a regrettable misunderstanding, but the evidence was irrefutable. When the footage showed Reeves taking a direct pulse blast to the chest and then, 23 seconds later, continuing to fight, several council members displayed their species equivalent of disbelief or alarm. In the viewing gallery, now fully recovered thanks to advanced medical treatment, Reeves sat beside Chen, watching the proceedings with mild interest. They're trying very hard not to look terrified, Chen observed quietly. Can you blame them? Reeves replied. They just watched a human take a shot that would kill most species, get back up, and then systematically dismantle an entire security force. If I were them, I'd be reconsidering a lot of assumptions about military parity. The Council's decision was predictably diplomatic. Formal censure of Commander Vrextool's actions, reparations to be paid to the human government, and mandatory review of cross-species diplomatic security protocols. The Harex representative accepted the judgment with poor grace, mandibles clicking in irritation throughout the proceedings. As the council adjourned, Reeves noticed several representatives casting surreptitious glances in her direction. Some curious, others clearly apprehensive. Word had spread quickly about the Deathworlder incident, as it was being called in diplomatic circles. I think you've become something of a celebrity, Chen said with a smirk. Just what every covert security operative wants. Later, in the station's observation lounge, Reeves stood at the viewport, watching distant ships move against the backdrop of stars. Ambassador Michaels joined her, carrying 2 glasses of what appeared to be Terran whiskey. By regulation, but I thought the occasion warranted it, he said, offering her one of the glasses. Reeves accepted with a nod of thanks. To successful diplomacy? To whatever that was, Michaels replied with a wry smile. Certainly not diplomacy as they teach it at the Academy. They sipped in companionable silence for a moment before the ambassador spoke again. The Security Council may have issued their official response, but the unofficial reaction is far more interesting. 3 different species have quietly approached me about establishing direct military-to-military communications with Earth. They're worried, they're terrified. One unarmed human female taking a lethal energy weapon blast and proceeding to neutralize an entire Harex security detail has rather forcefully revised their assessment of human combat capabilities. Reeves swirled the amber liquid in her glass. They should be more concerned about human diplomatic capabilities. We've managed to turn an attempted hostage situation into leverage for new military alliances. Ambassador Michaels raised his glass in acknowledgement. Indeed. Though I would prefer future negotiations involve fewer pulse rifle blasts to your thoracic cavity. No promises there either, sir. Across the station, in the Harex diplomatic suite, Representative Vrexkor was reviewing the security footage for the dozenth time, his cranial membrane flickering between anxiety and fascination, as he watched Reeves absorb a direct hit, fall, and then rise again to devastating effect. Impossible, he muttered to his aide. Our xenobiologists assured us that even Deathworlders could not survive such trauma. Perhaps, the aide suggested, our understanding of human physiology is incomplete. Rex-Corps' compound eyes remained fixed on the image of Reeves standing over command of Rextool, pulse rifle in hand and determination etched across her alien features. Perhaps our understanding of humans is incomplete in many respects, he said softly. Inform the High Command. The Dominion's strategic assessments regarding Earth require immediate revision. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, with its myriad species and civilizations, one fundamental truth was becoming increasingly clear. In a universe that had evolved primarily to seek equilibrium and avoid conflict, the appearance of a species forged in the crucible of a death world, where every day was a battle for survival against gravity, atmosphere, predators, and even their own kind, represented something entirely new and deeply unsettling. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. It had spent billions of years cultivating species that valued stability,